Can you believe Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a strict no-fish rule at Graceland? Not just eating it, but even saying the word was frowned upon seriously. And forget about wearing your shoes upstairs in his private sanctuary. Plus, if you dared to bring your own snacks into his house, you might get the side eye from the king himself. Number 9. Loud arguments and raised voices. Okay, picture this. Graceland. It's buzzing. Music might be playing. People are laughing. Maybe there's a movie marathon happening in the TV room. It's Elvis's sanctuary, his escape from the craziness of fame. He wanted it to be a place of fun, relaxation, and, believe it or not, relative peace. That's why one of the biggest unwritten, but definitely enforced, rules was no major blow-ups. Elvis hated conflict, especially loud, angry confrontations within the walls of his home. Now, this wasn't like some monastery where everyone had to whisper. The Memphis Mafia, his inner circle of friends and employees, were known for their joking, roughhousing, and general boisterousness. There was definitely noise. They played pranks, had water gun fights, rode golf carts around the grounds. It wasn't a library. But there was a line. When playful banter turned into genuine heated arguments, Elvis would shut it down fast. Think about it. Elvis was constantly surrounded by people. His entourage lived with him or spent most of their time there. Add family, girlfriends, staff, and occasional guests. That's a lot of personalities crammed together. Disagreements were bound to happen. Money, women, jobs, egos, the potential for friction was huge. But Elvis, despite his own occasional temper, flares, which were legendary but often short-lived, seemed to crave a harmonious environment at home. Sources close to him, like members of the Memphis Mafia in their memoirs, often talk about Elvis stepping in to mediate, or simply telling guys to knock it off if things got too intense. He might physically separate people, tell them to take it outside, literally, or just give them the look, that famous smoldering stare that could stop anyone in their tracks. Sometimes, he'd just leave the room if the vibe got too negative. His disapproval was usually enough. Why the aversion? Maybe it reminded him of tougher times growing up. Maybe the constant pressure of his career made him desperately want his home to be a haven, not a battleground. Or maybe he just genuinely disliked the feeling of anger and tension directed between people he cared about. He was known for his incredible generosity, buying cars and gifts for his friends, and perhaps that same desire to make people happy extended to wanting them to just get along in his presence. Imagine being one of the guys starting to really lay into someone over a card game or some other dispute, and suddenly feeling the king's eyes on you. The air would change instantly. The argument would likely fizzle out, replaced by an awkward silence or a hasty attempt to change the subject. It wasn't about suppressing opinions entirely, but about managing the way disagreements were expressed. Shouting matches, screaming fits, prolonged hostility. Those were reportedly on the Graceland banned list. He wanted loyalty and camaraderie, and loud, angry fights were the opposite of that vibe. It was his castle, and the king preferred peace and quiet. Well, his kind of peace and quiet punctuated by rock and roll, laughter, and the occasional karate yell, not by bitter feuds echoing through the halls. Maintaining that atmosphere, even amidst a swirling vortex of personalities and pressures, was a top priority. Number 8. The colors, brown and green, in large doses. Elvis had specific tastes. We all know about the peanut butter and banana sandwiches, fried of course, the flamboyant jumpsuits, the pink Cadillacs, but his preferences extended right down to the color palette of his surroundings, especially inside Graceland. And apparently, two colors that often didn't make the cut, particularly in large, overwhelming amounts, were brown and green. Now, hold on. You might be thinking, isn't the famous jungle room decked out in green shag carpet, faux fur, and dark wood? Yes. That's the fascinating contradiction with Elvis. Rules could be specific, bent, or entirely dependent on his mood or a particular vision. The jungle room, with its Polynesian-inspired, over-the-top vibe, complete with a built-in waterfall, was a deliberate, themed exception. It was meant to be exotic, a fantasy den. Elvis reportedly saw furniture in a Memphis store window, loved the den-like feel, and bought the whole set right then and there. The green and brown worked in that specific wild context. But outside of that deliberately kitschy space, reports and accounts from people who spent time at Graceland suggest Elvis wasn't a huge fan of drab, boring colors dominating his living space. He liked bold statements. Think red, gold, blue, white, black. Colors with energy, opulence, maybe a touch of flash. Mundane, earthy tones like standard browns and greens weren't typically his first choice for decorating large areas like walls or primary furniture, unless used as accents or in a very specific way, like the wood in the jungle room. His bedroom, for instance, underwent several transformations but often featured dramatic color schemes, deep reds, black, gold. The living room had white couches and accents of vibrant blue and gold. The dining room was known for its striking blue drapes. Even the kitchen wasn't immune to his flair, eventually getting updated with bright colors and modern, for the time, appliances. Why the dislike for brown and green? It's hard to say definitively, without Elvis telling us himself. Maybe he associated them with boring, everyday life, something he was actively trying to escape or transcend. Perhaps they felt too subdued, too conventional for the king of rock and roll. He lived a larger-than-life existence, and he wanted his home to reflect that. Dull colors might have felt well, dull, depressing even. Think about his stage wear. Rarely did you see him in a plain brown or forest green jumpsuit. It was electric blue, snow white, fiery red, jet black, often adorned with gold studs, chains, and elaborate embroidery. His cars followed suit: pink, yellow, white, black. Everything had to have a certain pop. So, while Graceland certainly wasn't entirely devoid of these colors, wood furniture exists, plants exist, large swathes of uninspired brown or green were generally avoided in the main decorating schemes favored by Elvis himself. He wanted vibrancy, richness, and a touch of the extraordinary even in his paint choices and fabric selections. It was all part of creating his own unique world, a palace fit for a king. And in his royal court, muddy brown and plain green often got vetoed. The exception, of course, being his beloved, wildly unique jungle room, proving that even the king's rules could have fascinating exceptions. Number 7. outside food and drinks. Imagine you're invited to Graceland. Wow! You're going to hang out with Elvis. You're thrilled, maybe a little nervous. You think, I'll bring a little something, maybe your famous homemade cookies, or a six-pack of your favorite soda, just as a small gesture, or to have something familiar. Bad idea. Generally speaking, bringing your own food and drinks into Graceland while Elvis lived there was a no-go. It wasn't necessarily about Elvis thinking your offering wasn't good enough, though he was particular about his food. It was more about control and hospitality, his way. Graceland had a fully staffed kitchen, running pretty much 24/7. Elvis employed cooks who knew exactly what he liked and how he liked it, from those perfectly fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches to burnt bacon, mashed potatoes, meatloaf, cheeseburgers, Pepsi, Mountain Valley spring water, specific types of cakes and pies, the list goes on. If Elvis or any of his guests were hungry or thirsty, day or night, all they had to do was ask. Food would appear, prepared just the way the king preferred. Bringing in outside provisions kind of disrupted that system. It implied, perhaps unintentionally, that what Graceland offered wasn't sufficient or wasn't to your liking. For Elvis, who was known for his southern hospitality and incredible generosity, providing for his guests, was part of his role as host. He wanted to feed you. He wanted to give you drink. Having people bring their own stuff might have felt like a slight, or at least unnecessary. Think about the logistics, too. Graceland wasn't just a home, it was the headquarters for Elvis's personal life. People were constantly coming and going. If everyone started bringing in their own food and drinks, it could create clutter confusion for the kitchen staff. Did Mr. Smith want the cheeseburger I made, or is he eating that sandwich he brought? And potential messes in areas where Elvis might not want food. There were exceptions, of course. If someone brought a special occasion cake, or perhaps a specific gift of food from afar, it might be accepted graciously. But casually showing up with a bag of chips, or your own thermos of coffee. Probably not the best move. The Memphis Mafia guys, living there or spending most of their time there, knew the drill. Eat what's provided. And there was always plenty provided. Elvis loved to see people enjoying the food from his kitchen. Stories abound about the sheer amount of food available. Trays of sandwiches, bowls of snacks, endless crates of Pepsi and other preferred beverages were staples. The kitchen was the heart of the house in many ways, always ready to fuel the late-night movie sessions, the impromptu music jams, or just a casual hangout. Elvis took pride in being able to offer anything his guests desired, instantly. So, the unofficial ban on outside food and drink wasn't about being stingy, quite the opposite. It was about Elvis wanting to be the ultimate provider, ensuring everyone was taken care of exactly according to the Graceland standard, which meant his standard. It was part of the all-encompassing experience of being in the king's inner sanctum. Relax, be waited on, and enjoy the specific comforts of home Elvis style. Just leave your lunchbox at home. Number 6. Improperly cooked bacon. This one is legendary. Elvis loved bacon. Like really loved bacon. But not just any bacon. It had to be cooked to his exacting standards. And failure to meet those standards meant the bacon was banned. from his plate at least, and possibly from the cook's good graces for a while. What was the standard? Burnt? Crispy? Shatteringly crisp? We're not talking slightly well done. We're talking bacon cooked until it was practically black, brittle, and would crumble if you looked at it too hard. If it had any softness, any chewiness, any hint of fleshy pink left, forget it. That was improperly cooked bacon, and Elvis wouldn't touch it. Numerous accounts from his cooks, maids, family members, and friends confirm this peculiar culinary demand. Mary Jenkins, his longtime cook, often spoke about it. She learned quickly that the way to Elvis's heart, at breakfast time anyway, was through bacon cooked to the point of incineration. She reportedly had to cook pounds and pounds of it, ensuring there were always enough perfectly burnt strips available whenever he wanted them. Imagine being a cook at Graceland. You're making breakfast for the king of rock and roll. You've got eggs, maybe grits or pancakes, and the crucial bacon. The pressure is on. You know the rule. Burn the bacon. But how burnt is burnt enough? Too little, and he rejects it. Too much, and maybe it just tastes like pure carbon, though maybe that's what he liked. It must have been a tricky balance to strike, consistently delivering bacon that met his specific definition of perfectly cooked, which to most people would mean ruined. Why did he like it this way? Theories range from simple taste preference, some people just like really crispy bacon, to perhaps habits formed in childhood, or maybe even a texture thing. Elvis had well-documented specific preferences for textures and tastes, the smoothness of mashed potatoes, the sweetness of Pepsi, the specific combination of peanut butter, banana, and fried bread. Super crispy bacon fits into that pattern of strong, specific sensory requirements. This wasn't just a mild preference, it was reportedly a serious requirement. Trays of bacon would be cooked, and only the pieces that achieved the desired level of crispiness would be served to him. The ones deemed improper were likely eaten by others or discarded. It became a running joke, a well-known quirk of the king. If you were eating breakfast with Elvis, you knew the bacon situation. This specific food rule highlights Elvis's meticulous nature when it came to his personal comforts and routines, especially within Graceland. He knew what he liked, and he had the means and the staff to ensure he got it exactly that way every single time. It wasn't about being difficult for the sake of it. It seemed genuinely tied to his enjoyment. Life on the road was unpredictable, chaotic. At home, he could control the small things, like ensuring his bacon had the perfect shattering crunch. So floppy, chewy, or even just moderately crispy bacon. Banned from the king's presence. Only the dark, brittle, ultra-crisp strips need apply. Number 5. Negative newspapers and magazines. Elvis Presley was one of the most famous people on the planet. His face was everywhere, on album covers, movie posters, magazines, newspapers. He was adored by millions. But fame is a double-edged sword, and alongside the glowing reviews and adoring fan pieces, there was also criticism, gossip, and negative press. And Elvis, he generally didn't want that negativity anywhere near him, especially inside Graceland. While it wasn't like there was a formal decree banning all newspapers or magazines, there was definitely a concerted effort by Elvis and his entourage, the Memphis Mafia, to shield him from articles or publications that were critical, unflattering, or spread rumors he didn't like. Graceland was his refuge, his bubble, and he preferred to keep the unpleasantness of the outside world, particularly negative opinions about himself or his work, firmly outside its gates. Think about the intense scrutiny he was under. Every career move, every relationship, every fluctuation in his weight, every fashion choice was fodder for the press. Some publications thrived on sensationalism and gossip. Reading negative commentary about yourself constantly would be draining and upsetting for anyone, let alone someone as sensitive and image-conscious as Elvis reportedly was. Members of the Memphis Mafia have described how they would often vet newspapers and magazines before Elvis saw them. If there was a particularly nasty article, they might hide that publication or remove the offending pages. Their job, as they saw it, was not just security and companionship, but also protecting Elvis's peace of mind. Why, let him get riled up or depressed by some critic's harsh words, or a gossip columnist's speculation if they could prevent it? Elvis wasn't completely oblivious, of course. He knew negativity existed. He sometimes commented on bad reviews or rumors he'd heard. But he didn't seem to actively seek out criticism, and his inner circle helped facilitate that. They created an environment where he was more likely to see the fan mail, the positive articles, the evidence of his success and popularity, rather than the critiques. This desire to filter the media wasn't unique to Elvis. Many celebrities try to avoid reading their own press, especially the bad stuff. But at Graceland, it was part of the larger effort to create a controlled, comfortable environment tailored to Elvis's preferences. He surrounded himself with loyal friends who reinforced his sense of self-worth and shielded him from external attacks. Banning, or at least heavily filtering, negative media was a key component of maintaining that protective bubble. Imagine the daily routine. Newspapers arrive, someone quickly scans them for potentially upsetting content related to Elvis, and then presents the safe sections or publications. Magazines known for gossip might just conveniently disappear before Elvis had a chance to see them. It was a form of information management designed to keep the king happy and focused, free from the sting of public criticism within his own home. So, while positive press and fan magazines might have been welcome, publications peddling negativity or harsh critiques were effectively banned from Elvis's immediate surroundings at Graceland. The king preferred his news like his bacon, served just the way he liked it. Number 4. Uninvited or unannounced guests. Graceland wasn't just a house, it was Elvis Presley's fortress of solitude, his private playground and his heavily guarded headquarters. While Elvis was known for his generosity and hospitality to those he invited, showing up unannounced was absolutely, positively forbidden. The gates of Graceland were famously guarded, and getting past them without clearance was virtually impossible. This wasn't just about typical celebrity privacy, it was about an intensely controlled environment. Elvis lived a unique life, operating on his own schedule, often sleeping all day and staying up all night, surrounded by his chosen group of friends and family. He valued spontaneity within his world, but he needed to be the one in control of who entered that world and when. Unexpected visitors disrupted the flow, breached the security, and potentially disturbed the king's carefully kibuted peace. The guards at the Graceland gates weren't just for show. They had strict instructions. Names were on lists. If you weren't expected, you weren't getting in. Period. Fans constantly flocked to the gates, hoping for a glimpse of Elvis or maybe even an invitation inside. But those invitations were exceedingly rare, and always initiated by Elvis himself. Trying to talk your way in, dropping names, or claiming you were an old friend wouldn't work unless it was prearranged and verified. Members of the Memphis Mafia acted as gatekeepers too, fielding calls and requests, deciding who could be granted access. Even friends or family might need to call ahead or check if it was a good time before just dropping by. Elvis might be sleeping, recording, watching movies, or simply not feeling sociable. His mood and schedule dictated access. Why such strict control? Security was obviously a major factor. Elvis was a massive star, and concerns about obsessive fans or potential threats were real. Controlling access was fundamental to ensuring his safety and the safety of everyone inside. Beyond security, it was about maintaining the unique atmosphere of Graceland. It was Elvis's private club, his sanctuary. He decided the guest list. Unannounced arrivals shattered that sense of control and exclusivity. Imagine the scene outside the gates, fans camping out, reporters hoping for a scoop, maybe even distant relatives or old acquaintances trying their luck. The guards, often family members or trusted friends themselves, had the tough job of saying no, politely but firmly, hundreds of times a day. Inside, Elvis could relax, knowing that anyone present was someone he wanted there. This ban on uninvited guests extended even to deliveries or service people. Everything was coordinated. Nothing happened at Graceland without the knowledge and approval of Elvis or his core team. It was a tightly run ship, designed to protect the king and preserve the unique insulated world he had built for himself behind those famous musical gates. So, if you ever dreamt of just popping by Graceland for a chat with Elvis back in the day, unless you got the personal nod from the king himself, you'd find the gates firmly and very politely closed. Spontaneity was for Elvis to initiate, not for outsiders to impose. Number 3, wearing shoes upstairs. Okay, this one feels a bit more intimate, more like a regular household rule, but amplified by the fact that it was Elvis's house. Reports from family members and those close to Elvis, including his stepbrothers, suggest that there was a strict no shoes upstairs policy at Graceland. The upstairs area was Elvis's private sanctuary, his inner sanctum, and he wanted it kept pristine and comfortable, which apparently meant leaving your outdoor footwear at the bottom of the stairs. The upstairs of Graceland contained Elvis's bedroom, his office, Lisa Marie's bedroom when she was there, and his dressing area. It was his ultimate escape, the one part of the house off limits even on official tours today. This was where he slept, relaxed, conducted personal business, and spent quiet time away from the constant activity downstairs. Keeping this space clean and comfortable was clearly a high priority. Think about it from a practical standpoint first. People constantly traipsing through the house, especially the large entourage and frequent guests, could track in a lot of dirt from outside. The downstairs areas, like the living room, jungle room, and kitchen, were high traffic zones designed for entertaining and activity. But the upstairs was different. It was personal. Taking off shoes would help keep the carpets cleaner and preserve the more intimate, relaxed atmosphere of his private quarters. Many people have similar rules in their own homes, asking guests to remove shoes at the door. But with Elvis, rules often had an extra layer. It wasn't just about cleanliness. It was likely also about comfort and control. Elvis loved lounging, being comfortable. Upstairs was his ultimate comfort zone. Shoes can be restrictive, dirty, and noisy on hard floors or stairs. A shoeless environment feels more relaxed, more like home. By enforcing this rule, Elvis ensured his private space maintained the specific feeling he wanted: soft, quiet, clean, and utterly separate from the outside world. Imagine being a guest or even a member of the Memphis Mafia needing to go upstairs to speak with Elvis. You'd reach the staircase, pause, slip off your shoes, and then proceed into the king's private domain. It marked a clear transition from the semi-public areas of the house to the truly personal space. It was a small act, but it reinforced the boundary and the respect expected when entering Elvis's inner sanctum. Priscilla, Presley, and others have described the upstairs decor, which changed over time but always reflected Elvis's personal taste, sometimes opulent, sometimes TCB sleek, taking care of business. Maintaining the appearance and feel of these rooms was important. Dirt, scuff marks, or the clatter of hard-soled shoes would detract from the carefully crafted environment. So, while Graceland was a place of fun, music, and sometimes chaos downstairs, the upstairs realm operated under a different code. It was the king's retreat, and the simple act of removing one's shoes was a mandatory sign of respect for that privacy, and a practical measure to keep his sanctuary just the way he liked it: clean, comfortable, and shoe-free. Try walking up those stairs with your boots on, and you'd likely be told, politely but firmly, to backtrack and leave your footwear behind. Number 2 fish. Any fish. Even the word fish. This is perhaps one of the most well-known and peculiar rules of Graceland during Elvis's reign. Absolutely no fish, none, not a zilch. And it wasn't just that fish couldn't be cooked or served in the house. Elvis reportedly hated fish so intensely that even the word fish was practically forbidden in his presence. The root of this extreme aversion, the smell. Elvis apparently couldn't stand the smell of fish cooking, or even just the lingering scent of fish. It was a powerful, visceral dislike. Southern cooking features plenty of fish. Catfish is a staple. But not in Elvis's house. If anyone in the household had a craving for fish, they had to indulge it elsewhere, far away from the king's sensitive nose. Stories abound about this fish-free zone. One famous anecdote involves Elvis's father, Vernon Presley. Vernon, unlike his son, actually enjoyed eating fish. However, out of respect for Elvis's strong feelings, and probably to avoid any unpleasantness, Vernon would reportedly eat his fish meals outside, sometimes in the garage or on the patio, ensuring no offensive odors wafted into the main house. Imagine the king's dad having to eat his catfish supper in the garage. Priscilla Presley also confirmed Elvis's intense dislike in her writings, noting that fish was never ever prepared or served at Graceland because Elvis simply couldn't tolerate it. The kitchen staff knew this rule implicitly. It was non-negotiable. You could whip up mountains of fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches, burgers, steaks, mashed potatoes, and countless other dishes, but fish was permanently off the menu. The ban extended beyond just cooking. People were apparently discouraged from even talking about fish around Elvis. Saying the word might conjure up the dreaded smell or taste in his mind, leading to displeasure. It sounds almost comical, like a strange taboo, but it speaks volumes about the power of Elvis's preferences within his own domain. When the king hated something, everyone knew it, and adjustments were made. Why such a strong reaction? Was it a bad childhood experience? A simple, unshakable sensory aversion? We can only speculate. Some people have powerful negative reactions to specific smells or tastes, and Elvis, known for his strong likes and dislikes in food and many other areas, seemed to have placed fish firmly at the top of his culinary blacklist. This rule created a unique culinary landscape at Graceland. While Southern food often embraces seafood, Elvis's home was a fish-free island. It's a surprising detail for a Memphis mansion, highlighting just how personalized Graceland was to Elvis's specific tastes and sensitivities. Everything revolved around keeping the king comfortable and happy, and that meant ensuring the air was never ever fouled by the scent of fish. Forget catch of the day. At Graceland, it was always anything but fish day. Number 1. Strangers, or even friends, casually touching his stuff. Elvis Presley was incredibly generous. He famously gave away cars, jewelry, houses, and cash to friends, family, and sometimes even total strangers. However, there was a flip side to this generosity. Within his personal space at Graceland, Elvis was reportedly quite particular about his belongings and didn't appreciate people casually handling his stuff without permission. Think about it. Graceland was filled with things Elvis had chosen, bought, or been gifted. Furniture, knickknacks, awards, clothes, jewelry, books, records. It was his personal collection, reflecting his tastes and his life story. While he might impulsively give away a prized possession, that was his prerogative. He didn't like the idea of people just picking things up, fiddling with them, or treating his home like a museum where everything was available to be touched. This wasn't necessarily about the monetary value of the items, although many were valuable. It seemed more about personal space, respect, and maintaining control over his environment. Elvis lived in a world where he was constantly being touched, grabbed at, and having his privacy invaded when he was out in public. Graceland was his sanctuary, and within its walls, he expected a certain level of deference and respect for his personal property. Members of the Memphis Mafia and other insiders likely understood this implicitly. You didn't just walk over and pick up one of Elvis's rings off the dresser to examine it unless invited to do so. You didn't rifle through papers on his desk or casually rearrange items on a shelf. There were boundaries, even within the relaxed, informal atmosphere that often prevailed. This possessiveness, or perhaps better termed protectiveness, of his personal belongings might seem contradictory to his legendary generosity, but it makes sense in the context of his life. Giving things away was an act of control and affection. Having people freely handle his things without asking might have felt like a small invasion, a chipping away at the boundaries he worked so hard to maintain. Imagine the sheer number of people who passed through Graceland over the years. If everyone felt free to handle everything, things could easily get broken, misplaced, or simply lose that sense of being Elvis's. He calculated his surroundings carefully, from the major furniture choices down to the smallest decorative objects. Maintaining the integrity of that calculated space was important. There are anecdotes, though often vague, suggesting Elvis could become annoyed if he felt people were being overly familiar with his possessions or his personal space. A look, a sharp word, or simply moving an item back to its place might signal his displeasure. It wasn't about being rude, it was about reminding people that while they were welcome guests in his home, it was still his home, filled with his things. This rule, perhaps more subtle than the no fish or no shoes upstairs, edict speaks to the complex nature of Elvis's personality, the blend of extreme generosity and a simultaneous need for control and personal boundaries. He would give you the shirt off his back, literally sometimes, but just don't casually pick up his favorite sunglasses off the table without asking first. It was his castle, and respecting the king's possessions was part of the code